Our next speakers are coming from the Dutch National Archives again. And actually, since the beginning of the digital era, archives have been looking for their space, their place in the social environment. The Dutch speaker will speak about how the National Archives of the Netherlands try to find places for new services. The title of the presentation of Wim Westland is Beyond the Boundary of Custody.
We are Ruud Jap, he's an archivist of the Netherlands Archives. And I'm Wim Westland. I'm not an archivist. I have a law background, so it's a comic duo. When we made this presentation, we thought we had the best idea never presented until the keynote of tomorrow. And all have been said tomorrow is in this presentation. So we wondered, is it necessary to do this presentation? Well, I think it is, because we presented from the situation in the Netherlands. We're looking back and looking forward to see how the boundary of custody develops in the Netherlands. Ruud, yours.
Thank you very much, Wim. Well, this is what we initially thought after this morning, like maybe we should skip our presentation, do something else entirely. But then we thought, well, let's try to tell a story from our perspective and maybe we could weigh in a little bit. First of all, some background information of the Netherlands. As you can see, our government administration, our archival situation is a very tier-based system. There are tiers on local government, on regional government, and on state government. And every tier has its own archival institutions which, well, take custody of information, of records which are transferred to the archival institution. This means that information and archives are not only legally carved up between those tiers, but also physically carved up between those tiers. So regional archives are somewhere in a region and province. State archives are in The Hague at the National Archives. Municipal archives are with the local governments in all over the Netherlands. And you see that this is entrenched in Dutch legislature as well. There are basically three important laws that, and regulations that stipulate information management in the Netherlands. It is the Archives Act, of course. It is the Freedom of Information Act, and it is the Act on Data Protection. And I will not further discuss these laws and regulations here, but it's important to note that all these laws and regulations, they assume that information travels through a linear process. It has a beginning and an end. And it assumes that information is a physical thing, something you can take and own and put in some little box or something, or in a certain holding. And this is quite important for the rest of our story, so please take note. Well, as discussed earlier, the record continuum isn't the first time is mentioned today, and I presented this just to make an opposite of the custody model, which is nowadays practiced in the Netherlands. As in custody, we have a long tradition in archival theory, and custody is so much entrenched in our legislature that it forms everything we have done up till now. Custody in a nutshell states that archival records are only those records which are under control and under management of an archivist, of an archival institution. Everything outside the archival institution, outside control and management of an archivist, is simply not an archival record, and is not looked upon. It's in a nutshell. This proved to be problematic with digital records. And as commented earlier on, David Beerman, Adrian Cunningham, they all stated that a digital record can't be, is by nature not a physical entity, it's a logical entity. It is by nature not a linear entity. It can be reused, it can be reviewed, it can be used in different times by different persons, by different actors, and so on. The traditional custody model, in which a record is a physical object, which is information that passes on a linear life cycle, it doesn't fit anymore. And in the Netherlands, we like to theorize a lot, so we really love this model. We're like, oh yeah, we can use this, you can use this. But of course, we did not. In practice, we developed our first digital infrastructure was, and I'm coining a term from my good friend Ronald Rommelse in his thesis on archival science. We developed a horseless carriage, and it's been derived from the horseless carriage syndrome, in which states that we tend to solve technological challenges with the nowadays technology, which is obviously a very bad idea, because you limit yourself in ideas and in possibilities, and you can't really face that challenge. So to say, our first digital infrastructure, and I think every digital infrastructure in the Netherlands, was a horseless carriage, to each his own. We supported, as a minimal viable product, we supported the ingest, the management, and the dissemination of archival records, which in all sense and purposes were physical objects which needed to be transferred from one place to another at a certain point of time. It was information that had died in the primary process, in the business process, and was of less value to the primary use, and had only historical value. But it was a good thing we started, because as people who actually wrote a horseless carriage can tell you, you see the limitations of that solution very, very fast. So what we did, learning from this first installment of our infrastructure, is that other opportunities could arise, and that the need for physical control and logical carving up of information wasn't really necessary anymore in the digital age. We first developed a shared digital infrastructure in which we shared our repository with other archival institutions. And in a way, this was still fairly within the custody theory, but it made it possible not to carve up information logically anymore. We could present it as a whole, and we could use it as a whole. So it would not be carved up anymore. The other thing we researched is that maybe we could expand the legal boundary of custody, in which we take control of information which is not legally under our control or under our management as an archive. And I think that was an important step we took, is that we wanted to take action and wanted to take a responsibility for information which traditionally was out of our range of custody, so to say. In a nutshell, what we did, we took up a shared responsibility for record management with the record creator. And it roughly translates to outplacement. We call it uitplaatsen in the Netherlands. And outplacement states that archival records which are legally still owned by the record creator and legally under the responsibility of the record creator are managed by the National Archives or by an archival institution, and in such a way, record creator and archival institution share their responsibility. And there were clear advantages, in our opinion. We could bring information in view earlier than normally. We could address preservation problems earlier. And furthermore, we could detect design flaws in the record management systems of the record creators. because we could actually see the information which we priorly could not see, could not touch upon, and could not judge or inspect as a National Archive. This model is rolled out now. We have several clients who make use of this outplacement service, and it helps us a lot to actually formulate the real challenges we have surrounding preservation and surrounding good record management over a long period of time. What it also does is that it, for the record creator, they can share their information also more easily between the different institutions and organizations. As you can see, we bring it together when we outplace, and then we can share it with other record creators, and they can use information not once but twice, but for different processes as well. And we felt very confident about this model, and so did the record creators. And we thought, well, if they feel very confident about this cooperation, maybe we can be more confident as well as an archival institution. And where that is going to take us, my colleague Wim will elaborate on, and he will take you further down this journey.
Okay, in some other presentations it wasn't mentioned. Information is in networks, change of information, Rotterdam talked about it. But there are also some issues from archival perspective. The archivists do always have information in context. Otherwise, information is, data is not worth. We have legal problems in a network. Who's owner of the information? Is information on a central place? And a technical, we talked about it earlier, large data streams, large databases, large contexts of information, large volumes. That has an impact on organizations, also on the organization of the National Archives in the Netherlands. We think we, in the future, are a node in a network. Not a part of the network, but in the network, instead of what John said, an archival institution had to be above the network. We think, in theory, you can hold that for the next few years, but in the future, I think that will be, well, unrealistic. And that's what we call your depot, my depot. We will see that the information is not only with the archival institutions. It will be in the network. That we found out by some learning by doing, some projects we do with other institutions. The audiovisual material of the Parliament, that's archival material. We don't have that material in the National Archives. We store it at the Institute of Sound and Vision in the Netherlands. It's not in our own archive. That's new for us. There's new challenges. And although also land registry, it's always it's mentioned in another situation, but the cadastre has its own archives. The archives are not within the National Archives. We only have viewers to view what information, what archival information is in the Netherlands. That comes to the question, is a central digital repository future-proof? We think maybe it's future-proof as a last resort. Distributing, connecting, long-term access, I think that is the role from the National Archives in the Netherlands in the future. But there are some issues. Issues on long-term access. Who's responsible for the long-term access of information? Who's responsible and who does the preservation on the archival items. Is it public information, or is it information we hold back from the public? Some legal issues and technical solutions. Well, the future, we don't know what technical solutions there are and what we have to do with it. And then supervision. Who will supervise that information? Is it the National Archives, or is it audit services, or how do we do that in the future? And last but not least, it's all technical driven. So use technology as a change agent, because it is there. We can't influence it, we only can adapt it. And what we try to do is to have short-term results, long-term planning, large projects, but we have to do something to understand the problems and to solve it. But we do have a long-term strategy. And also, blockchain is a question, how to use it, or, well, what influences it has on the archives. But I think the organizations will be flexible with a long-term strategy. That's the best we can do. That's all.
So, questions to Wim and Jude, then. Yes? First rows.
Thank you for this interesting presentation. What I found particularly appealing, let's say, is this outplacement service, where, if I understood correctly, you offer your infrastructure and your expertise to other record creators. Now, if I may be curious, is that for free, or do the others pay for that? And is that other public institutions only, or can it also be businesses or insurances or other bodies who don't have the core expertise in records management? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Very good question as well. The story about how we exploit our services could be another presentation in all. To answer your question, outplacement is an optional service we provide as National Archives. And it's only provided to public actors, so government actors, so to say, and other archival institutions. It is a paid service. But paid service is not a commercial service in the Netherlands. It means in the government mandate, it means that we ask the price of costs. So there's no margin there or anything. It's everything we have to do extra, which is not funded within our lump sum funding, is sent as a bill to the outplacing agent or outplacing actor.
One last question. Yeah, the first show. Thank you, John.
So I loved your presentation. Really, really interesting for me. I think this question of starting to split the different types of value that the archive provides and thinking about preservation value separately from producing the record at the point that it becomes it becomes accessible, and the archives wanting to stay quite close to the user in terms of access, but being more flexible in terms of helping figure out who's best placed to mitigate the preservation risk, which sometimes will be the archives, but not always, depending on the information you're dealing with. I think that is our future, and I brilliantly expressed here. I loved it.
Oh, thank you very much. Could I add something about about the splitting of the preservation and the access, what we found in our services is that our motive was indeed to expand our reach of preservation and look at what we can do as an archive in order to provide access for the public. But what we noticed is that by doing so, we provided other access options for the record creators themselves, and they loved it. So now they're coming with their own ideas how to improve record management, instead of that we have to tell them, well, you have to improve record management because it's really bad. So yeah, thank you.
So thank you for the presenters.
We still have 10 seconds.
6, 5, 4. So thank you again.